Revised Improvement Project, a resolution approving a revised project design for the Red Oak Park Stream Bank improvements submitted by the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission Region 1 Stream Team.
Good evening. Carole Jones with the Parks Department. I don't have any new information tonight. You saw the presentation by Mr. Evans at the agenda session on his revised plan. You know, his revised plan will save approximately 17 trees from the original plan. And something else, this actually is new information. Of the trees that are still to be removed, even in the revised plan, about half of those, 47%, are compromised. In other words, they're trees that are undercut. So I want you to have that information as well.
So they're going to come out anyway. I mean,
they're the ones that are hanging on. I didn't realize it was as many as it is, but
they're going to die or fall in or
right.
something.
Right. Sarah Patterson, the urban forester, and I went out there today and counted those.
Because the roots are exposed.
Yes, ma'am. And we only counted the ones that were really, I let her determine it as an urban forester. So.
All right, anything else? Yes, sir.
Well, just a couple of questions. I know, Carol, that there was some discussion the other night at the agenda session about some sort of retention pond on the south end of town. I don't know. And then there was other talk about rain gardens in some of the areas. What's your take on those two items?
I think you mean the south end of the park, but we'll take a detention pond on the south end of town.
South end of town.
I meant south. There you go. Put a retention pond on the south end of town.
Revitalize.
Now they'll probably want to put me in it, but go ahead. And, I meant the south end of the park.
I understand. Mr. Evans addressed that. He said, he hadn't studied that. I don't think the city engineering staff has studied it. I haven't studied it in detail. My guess is there's not enough space available to hold the volume of water. The city engineering report that was done in 2004, the preliminary report and design, indicated, on the other night we had approximately 140 acres of drainage to New Bridge Road, to the culvert. And at that point, the city engineering's report in 2004 estimated almost 450 cubic feet per second in a 10-year storm. That's a lot of flow. So my guess is that bulb in the park, and don't forget that the park is on the east side of that bulb.
Yes.
And then that unused area is on the west side of that bulb. My guess is there's not enough room to hold the amount of water that is coming through there.
So you don't think that would be feasible to do then,
right.
in your opinion?
And as Mr. Evans pointed out the other night, you're going to have to still design it to overflow like you do any detention basin, and then that overflow is going to go through the stream in the park.
And I guess with a follow-up question, even if you put the retention pond there, is it your opinion that we would have to follow the same plan that we have after you get out of the area? Even if you put the retention pond, you still think we're still going to have to widen it like it's on the revised plan anyway?
I think because of the amount of erosion that's already out there, even if you could stop all of the water from coming from the south, you still have all the water coming from the houses that are adjacent to the stream. So I think you still need to do something to stabilize the stream bank.
And even if you wanted to do the rain gardens, you'd still have to get permission from the property owners to do that sort of thing.
That's what I would think. I'm not saying that's not a Kit's way, nodding his head.
I mean, I'm just...
Well, they can do the rain gardens in their yard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
So I don't know how the city would go about handling the rain gardens.
That would be your job, Carol.
Yes. So I just wanted to get some clarification because there's been a few questions. So thank you.
Okay.
All right, any other questions from the council?
Yes, Mayor. Don't we have a drainage ordinance in place?
Yes, ma'am, we do.
Is it enacted?
As far as I know, it is.
Well, I wanted to kind of understand how we got here to begin with.
Right.
And wondered if somebody could try to answer that for me. If we have a drainage ordinance,
Ron?
why we get here?
It's my understanding, looking at the developments in that watershed, the Willow Heights, Willow Springs, thank you. Some Bridgeport is really just a very minor part of Bridgeport. The bulk of these were done prior to the passage of the stormwater management ordinance.
And when was that?
94.
That's when the ordinance was passed?
Yes, ma'am. Yep. So it's certainly being enforced today, I can tell you that.
Greatly revised just a year or so ago. Improved. Stormwater ordinance, Ron.
All right, any other questions for the staff right now? All right, Carol, you have anything else?
No, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
There has been discussion about the rain gardens, and I guess and I'm sure that some of the public out there is going to address that whenever the public has an opportunity to speak. But I mean, is there room on the city's property to put rain gardens, or is this something that I guess I need to wait and let them present whatever they're thinking out there about the rain gardens? But there's no way for us to mandate for people to put rain gardens in their yard, is there?
Well, I think that's probably a question that Kit would need to answer. The way I understand rain gardens, I've been working a little bit with Katie Teague and Mark Boyer on another project, and the placement of rain gardens depends on where there is where there can be curb cuts from storm drainage or curb and gutter. You got to get water into these rain gardens, or gutters, downspouts from people's houses. So there are a lot of things that go into the placement. So the city parks area that is within the city park property may not be the best applicant to receive a rain garden. You know, the water may not be coming directly into a spot that you need.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we're getting some drainage. I think I showed on that picture, and I didn't bring any presentations or visual aids tonight, but there's a piece of, there's a draw that's actually off of the city's park property.
Yeah.
That some of that, there's at least that one storm drain pipe coming in there. I suspect there's also some on the west side. Yeah. But all of those things, all of those inlets and curb and gutter and all that would need to be looked at and studied, and then determine where the best placement of the rain gardens would be in an area, in a watershed. So.
One more quick thing about my drainage ordinance and it being 1994. So that would mean that if it happened, it was built before then, and there was a problem, since it was before 1994, we would just think, oh well. I'm just trying to understand why that's a problem to me to understand. Okay. The way I understand it is the ordinance for stormwater management passed in 1994. These developments were probably being built about that time, but were probably reviewed by the city through the planning and engineering staff in 92, 93 timeframe before the ordinance was in place, and therefore they were approved before the ordinance was in place. And so they got constructed, and I don't think that it was, I just think there just wasn't a stormwater management ordinance, which there's still some cities that don't have it now, today. And Brenda pointed out that ordinance, that was the beginning of the ordinance. It's been revised many times since then, and probably through us learning this didn't work and this isn't strict enough, or, you know, this isn't what we need to do. That's the way I understand it.
Ron, do you have any more information on that question?
Can you ask the question one more time? Because I don't think we're answering it to your satisfaction. So if you can ask me one more time.
Let me ask.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, please.
I think what I think she's asking, or at least what I'd like to know if she's not asking it, is during that time, and even though we knew we didn't have an ordinance in place and those subdivisions were being constructed, did we know that it was causing this problem? And if so, what did we do about it? And if we didn't do anything, why didn't we do anything about it?
That's what I was trying to say.
It's very hard to go back and say what we actually knew back then. I can tell you the first time I set foot in this area close to 8.5 years ago, there was no creek. You basically, it could be mowed over, it could be walked over. So this is something that has really occurred in the last, I'd say, 10 years. It was really that quick in developing, and primarily due to the soil out there. It's just deposited materials over the years, and it quickly erodes. So I'm not sure if I'm completely answering the question, but it just happened so quick.
Yeah, let me ask you another question. What's the difference between the stormwater ordinances we have now in a broad sense versus 1990, before 1994?
In a broad sense, it's you would have to detain to match pre-development conditions. And I would say, even with today's regulations, it wouldn't surprise me if we had a problem out there. It may not be as bad, but I would still suspect that even with detention ponds all over that basin, we would still have some erosion in this area.
Thank you for stabbing at it again.
You're welcome. Question, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
One of the things here I noticed, it says the use of volunteers for the planting of the shrubs and trees also facilitates keeping the project costs low. I like that. My question is that going to probably primarily be citizens that live in that area, or do we know who's going to be, the volunteers are going to be?
No, sir, we have not, sought out volunteers for that, but it doesn't have to be limited to that area.
Connie acted like she might know something about that.
Well, I believe the Boy Scouts.
Boy Scouts?
They're interested too, and I haven't contacted the Girl Scouts yet, but I know there are several groups out there. And I might just have one clarification back to, I know in 1994 was when we received the park, and I worked for the Parks Department at that time. I left the city of Fayetteville for 4 years, came back in 1998, and guess what? The problem existed. So between that 4-year span from 94 to 98, we had a lot of erosion happening because of the massive amount of homes that were being built and all. So it was remarkable how it happened so quickly.
Yeah, and one of the things about the timeline, Robert, I went back through the city files, and the first thing I found indicated in 1997 that the developer that developed those subdivisions, some of those subdivisions anyway, and the park was actually built by a developer, they recognized there were some erosion problems as early as 1997. That's when, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but at Newbridge, there's a section that's almost 100 or so, maybe a little more than 100 feet long, that is concreted and has the cross ties. So that was the first attempt to and then the city engineering staff looked at it in 2004, and we're trying to, I think, Ron, weren't you guys trying to get a grant from the Illinois River Watershed Partnership? And I think that didn't get the grant for that, but the city has tried several things over the years to try to do things to this park and try to fix this problem. And Mr. Evans, the Game and Fish Commission, his plan is the latest attempt. We wanted to do something that was more natural.
Thanks, Carol. Do we have any other questions for the staff on this? Anyone from the public have anything to add to this conversation? Aubrey.
Aubrey Shepherd. Jim Bemis and I have looked at the property. He lives near it, I don't. But it's a beautiful spot, and it's much like many places where we have prairie plateau sort of areas, and then you have a deep draw, and that's what occurred there. The deep draw became a gully. Pardon me. So the view today in watershed management in all over the country is that you do use rain gardens and storm gardens, and many cities are doing it. The thing that I emailed to a lot of people this week was a brochure from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on how to do it. you got to keep the water where it falls. The closer you soak it into the ground, or the longer you can keep it in on that property, then the less erosion you're going to have downstream. And this applies to water quality as well as the erosion and other effects. So I'm actually asking you to look at this a bit more. And I recognize, as Kit does, that it's very difficult to get all the landowners on board. But if you got a certain percentage, which I can't name, then you would have enough private owners there that were willing to have rain gardens in their yards. And of course, Dan, you've been on a lot of these rain garden building things. You make them beautiful. It's not something bad to have in your yard. You just pick the lowest area and route the water there from your roof. Instead of letting it run on your driveway, you try to route it out into the grass. If you don't have a rain garden, at least don't put it on the concrete. The longer you keep it soaking in. And probably those yards upstream all around the park are primarily still prairie-type soil, absorbent soil, except where they put down red dirt or whatever for the concrete base of the driveway and the house. So I suspect there's pretty good permeability there still. So if we took time to decide whether to do this plan or not, I think that we might find that a decent percentage of the people would say, well, I'll have one in my yard if Katie Teague from the county and Park Department, and maybe you go to some of them and help educate people about them, would actually get on board and want to do it in their yards. And it's not as expensive if each person does his yard. He gets his own plants. You can go dig some of them up at a lot of places that are native plants and put there. You don't have to buy them all, but there are sources of native plants in the state. So I'm just saying that you do need to keep the water upstream. There's always going to be a massive flow down that, and it's going to erode something. And if you take out a bunch of trees to save a few trees, or whichever the percentage is going to be, there will be more erosion. If you've been on streams around here, as I have since I first came here 40 years ago, you'll see the same old big tree with its roots eroded out along the stream bank. And some of those are still there that I saw 40 years ago. And some of them have been gone a long time. Just depends on where they are in the bend of the stream and so forth. So Dave's plan is something that will work on a farm with a lot of property, but you've got very little to work with. And it's not going to solve the whole problem. And he knows what he's doing. I can't deny that. But I'd like to see us wait and talk to the neighbors, do public education as we've done with these demonstration gardens, and try to see if we can get people on board. And it would be up to neighbors to help neighbors and invite neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Aubrey. How are you, Jim?
Jim Bemis, Ward 4, 2 or 3 minute walk from this park. You've seen my emails, I hope. You've seen the pictures. I'm not able to add anything to what Aubrey and Mr. Evans, Ms. Jones have said. I have a lot of respect for them. I ask you for a little more time to look at this and take the long-range view. We have no assurance that what we're doing tonight is just not another dab at it. We've heard that the city has tried hard probably to get something done out there and in the general area. But folks, it's still happening, and what can we expect in the future downstream from there? Mr. Evans is top-notch. Maybe y'all saw Melissa Terry had a few comments to make on the listserv tonight. Maybe there's some money out there. The sustainability, Mayor, this is a classic example of how you rectify what's been done already to us. How do we deal with it? There's a demonstration for you, hands-on out there. The park itself lends itself to that. We're in a perfect spot to show the people in this community that we are into sustainability for real. Get serious with it. You start with 8 acres. We're only able to use about half of that park now. Have y'all walked that? Have you walked it from the south end to the north? If you did, you had to have a machete with you because you can't do it. A 6-year-old can walk down the creek. But I've been out there since 2001, and a lot of this has occurred since then. They put in the parks on the west side of that since then. And what's happened, we've lost, I'd say, a good 2 or 3 feet in the bottom of that creek from the south end to the north. And I haven't heard anybody talk about what's happening north of there. What's going on after we get this done? Is this really going to solve the problem? I'd like to hear that discussed in an open meeting. I'd ask you to please have another meeting, have the parks people, have Mr. Evans there, have people who really know this business. It ties into your previous discussion about the watershed, what we're doing to Clear Creek on down from there. I guess it's hamstring that it goes. But anyway, it's going to move on over to the Illinois later on. So give it a little more thought. It's not just an 8-acre park we're talking about. We're talking about what's happening in this city, what's happening all over the western part of the city for sure. East of me, I've got 3 subdivisions going in plus the links. I don't know how that's going to drain into the, further on west. I don't have a feel for that, but I think it could be studied. I think Tim has studied some of that. He's told us what the drainage area is, but I'd like to know what's going to happen in the future. And I hope y'all will give us a little bit more attention, study it some more, maybe come up with some money. There are some grants out there according to what I didn't get a good chance to look at what Melissa sent, but she sent us about 10 different places we could go and start looking. Sustainability, Mayor, that's what we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. Close the public comment, bring it back to the council. Yes, sir.
Well, what I'd like to do is to go ahead and table this. And I think probably I should table it indefinitely where we can have enough time to discuss it. I'm not saying if we can get done in 2 weeks or a month, then we'll bring it back then. If the council will give us just a little bit of time here, we'll see what can be worked out, whatever kind of grant money we can come up with. We can discuss it with the neighborhood. We can kick it around some more. I mean, this thing's been out there for a while, so I think we could wait, at least 30 more days one way or the other.
Yes, ma'am.
Connie, Carol, is this something that's doable, waiting and having some more discussion, or what? Do you agree with this?
Well, we do know that we probably cannot start on it till we have lights of the Ozarks up. That project is starting very next week. So we're looking at the 1st of January, till we can come, till we can start it. And I think David Evans has pretty much said that he couldn't do it till after the beginning of the year too, till January. So, we've missed the window now.
So it'll probably be spring before actually we can do something.
It needs to be done before spring. If not, then we're going to have to wait till the drier part of the year, till, July, August comes in.
Okay.
Anything else? Is it a motion to table?
I'm going to make a motion to table indefinitely.
We have a motion and a second to table this indefinitely. Is there any other discussion on that? Shall the motion pass?
Cook.
Yes.
Allen.
Yes.
Rhodes.
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
Lucas.
Yes.
Jordan.
Yes.
Gray. Yes. Teal.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll move along to number 4, rezoning 7-2691 with J.B. Hayes, an ordinance rezoning that property described in rezoning petition RZN 7-2691 for approximately 1.8 acres located at 5393 East Huntsville Road from RSF4 residential single family 4 units per acre to C1 neighborhood commercial.
Be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Fayetteville, Arkansas, Section 1, that the zone classification following described property is hereby changed as follows from RSF4 residential single family 4 units per acre to C1 neighborhood commercial as shown in Exhibits A and B attached thereto and made part hereof. Section 2, the official zoning map of the City of Fayetteville, Arkansas is hereby amended to reflect the zoning change provided in Section 1 above.
How are you, Lee?
I'm Lee Ward. I do not have a presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions and appreciate your consideration.
Jeremy, you have anything to add to this?
Planning staff did recommend approval of this rezoning request to C1 from RSF4. It's at the corner of Ed Edwards Road, which is a collector street in our master street plan, and Highway 16 or Huntsville Road, which is a principal arterial. So it creates a spot where it's a corner that in our city plan 2025, it states that we are looking for low-intensity non-residential uses in corner locations primarily to serve surrounding residential areas. I think that last portion is very important in this particular application because a rezoning to C1 would add the opportunity to provide for services to existing and future residents in this area, which have been stated over and over in meetings that are needed within this area on the east side of Fayetteville, especially along Huntsville. Closest primary services are either at Crossover and Mission, or Elkins is actually closer in some regards to some of the residents out here. So providing some non-residential services we feel is important within this area. It does a lot of things. It decreases traffic just on the roads because you can shop in smaller local areas as opposed to getting back out on the arterials. The Planning Commission also voted unanimously to forward this request to you, voting in favor of that. Staff has noted, just for the record, that access for future development on this site would likely be intensified from a residential, from a commercial zoning as compared to residential, and we'll look at that closely with future development, which may limit or restrict access to Huntsville Road in favor of access to Ed Edwards. I don't have any further information.
Do you have any questions for Jeremy? Yes, ma'am.
I don't have any questions, no. So.
I don't either.
That's a statement.
Do you have a statement?
Well, I have not heard from anyone out there, and I have, other with the exception of the one lady that objected to another beauty shop, I believe, but this could be other uses too in the future. But I will say though that I heard today from someone, and I hear from her fairly regularly about the fact that there are there's just not enough businesses on Huntsville. And I think that's true. So I think anytime we have a situation where the planning staff recommends it, someone actually wants to utilize it, and it's there, I think that's a good thing for that area. So I strongly support this.
Okay. Any other comments? We're on our first reading. I entertain a motion to suspend the rules.
So moved.
Second.
Go to the second reading.
Cook.
Yes.
Allen.
Yes.
Rhodes.
Yes.
Farrell.
Yes.
Lucas.
Yes.
Jordan.
Yes.
Gray. Yes. Hill.
Yes.
An ordinance rezoning that property described in rezoning petition RZN